Hello, Mr. Garrity here once again. Continuing this Geography Endeavour video series where we're going to look at the importance of having proof or having evidence within our exam question answers. Here we're going to look at the physical case studies, and I'm going to lead you through a series of revision tasks that will help you revise and remember the case studies we've done and where best to apply them to the questions.
A quick disclaimer before we begin is that just listening to these instructions will not magically make your grades improve. You must practice what is in this video if you wish to see improvement.
Now, just before we begin, it's worth noting a quick equipment list for these revision tasks. You will need something to take down notes. This might be the form of a tablet that you can write on, or it may be even just a simple scrap of paper, A4, A3, up to you. You'll need something to write with or something to note take with, since it's actual revision notes that you will be making. You'll need to have your revision guide to hand as well. This is the revision guide that you were given from the school in order to do revision work with. And lastly, you need a focused environment. So make sure that music is turned off. Make sure that any video games or any kind of TV distractions have also been put away to allow you to fully focus on the revision task. Here I will demonstrate the revision task we would expect. The first thing you need is to lay out whatever you're going to use to take notes, whether it be a piece of paper or whether it be a tablet. Choose the case study you're going to do. I'm going to do New Zealand as the demonstration, which means I'm going to ignore the rest that are listed here. Now, this first revision task involves just putting down what is immediately in our head in about the first 10 minutes of this entire exercise. In terms of the information that you need, for most case studies, particularly for hazards, you need to have some initial details, some background, some dates when they happened, the size of the events, etc. You need the effects and the impacts of the hazard on the place, so social, economic, environmental, what's happened to the people, to the money, to the environment. And then, how did the people react? What were the responses, both in the short term and in the long term? Now here in about 10 minutes, I just need to jot down what's in my head. What do I initially remember about New Zealand? Well, I remember the earthquake was 7.8 in terms of its magnitude, and I remember it happening at a destructive plate margin, but I don't quite remember much else. With that, I move on to the effects and impacts. Now I easily remember that only 2 people died and only 50 people were seriously injured or put into hospital. In terms of economic damage, I remember it was in the billions, but I'm not entirely sure how much. The first number that comes into my head is 8 billion, but I might have to check that out. I also remember there was something to do with power being lost in some way. Again, that's the first thing that comes into my head, and I might have to check it. Moving right along again to responses, I remember the evacuation. That was able to evacuate 200 people. And long term, I remember something about a flexi pipe, and it taking about 2 years to build and repair. But that's about as much as I immediately remember about the case study. After about 10 minutes, this is the moment when you say, okay, let's go and top up my knowledge. You open up the revision guide. I recommend changing pen colour or changing pencil colour, whatever would suit, and then add what you think might be some good details. So for example, it might be good to remember that this event happened in 2016. In terms of effects and impacts, it was actually $8.5 billion that were lost. And ultimately, it wasn't that power was lost, but rather that power was cut off to make sure that more people were safe and that some of the gas pipes and the electric pipes weren't still live and causing a danger to potential survivors. In terms of the responses, this first evacuation happened within 24 hours, and the flexi pipe was for water. And here we can see how our revision is building, how we test what knowledge we already have locked in regarding our case study, and what extra bits we would specifically like to recall and revise. To do that, you might do some initial copying out, or indeed you might do some flashcards to help you along. But it's a really good exercise to check what is already inside your head and to monitor what you need to revise, because you don't revise what you do know, you revise what it is you don't know. For convenience, I'm simply going to outline that at the revision guide, after you've done your initial note-taking, your New Zealand and Nepal case studies can be found on pages 6 and 7 of the revision guide. Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines can be found on page 11, and the Somerset flood in the UK can be found on page 14. If moving on to ecosystems, it's the same process, just bear in mind that many of the headings will have changed from hazards. Here, instead of looking at details and then the impacts of the hazard, we're now looking at the location of these ecosystems, the adaptations of the flora and fauna, the wildlife and the plants that grow up there, the opportunities for economic development, the challenges to this economic development, and then ultimately, is it possible to make money whilst being sustainable for the environment, that is not destroying it, but keeping it at the same quality for future generations. The exercise is exactly the same. Jot down what you remember for the first 10 minutes. Check back with a different colour pen when looking at the revision guide. And here to help you, the revision guide pages are page 21, the small scale Clapton Lee reed bed, pages 26 and 27 for the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, South America,
Mark's been given
and pages
to find the
36 and 37 for the cold environment of the polar and tundra of Alaska, United States, North America.
Milligrams. Again, a 5
Very similar task again, this time to do with landscapes, although here we would advise that your revision task should focus around the location of these specific landscapes, how they are formed, and ultimately how they managed. When you wish to check back into the revision guide, you'll find the landscapes for the coast on page 45 and the management of them on page 47. The River Clyde on page 55 and Oxford management of the river on page 58. Best of luck, everybody.